The blockade of the Strait of Hormuz has officially begun. It began with an ultimatum that expired. The United States Fifth Fleet has begun blocking shipping lanes all around Iran. In Tehran, they are threatening retaliation against the region's ports. The Revolutionary Guards in Iran are in an internal crisis. The confrontation inside the regime in Tehran is escalating. So, will the talks with Iran resume? According to Vice President Vance, the ball is in their court. The Trump administration is examining a date and location for the continuation of the negotiations. We need to be ready quickly. After Trump said that the right people from Iran had called, the United States is examining where talks could be held if they resume. Is an armada of tankers on their way to the Gulf of Mexico? Will American oil be the answer to the global energy problem as a substitute for Iran? Israel and Lebanon will discuss a peace agreement tomorrow. And in response, the Secretary General of Hezbollah said, "We will kidnap Israeli soldiers." And that's a quote. In Israel, however, they're identifying growing support in the Lebanese streets for an agreement and for the desire of the Lebanese people to live in peace with Israel. In Israel, we hope that the talks will isolate and weaken the standing of the Hezbollah terrorist organization. The Secretary General of the terrorist organization declared today that the negotiations are unnecessary. Hezbollah will not surrender. The Lebanese army is not capable of fighting its own citizens. And I will say that here in Israel as well, we are praying for peace with the Lebanese people. Just as Marco Rubio, who is going to participate in the peace talks, said, Israel and Lebanon are not fighting one another. There is no reason that they should not talk. And that is true. Our war is not with Lebanon. We are fighting the Islamic and murderous terrorist organization that grew inside Lebanon called Hezbollah. Therefore, we will continue to pray for peace. And I call on all of you to join us. I'm Yair Pinto. With me is Mati Shoshani. And we are boots on the ground. We bring you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel and also the whole truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. And this is the opening day 46 of the war Roaring Lion, or if you're in America, Epic Fury. At this very moment, more than 15 American warships are already deployed in the area to support the United States blockade and their operations on the Strait of Hormuz. The President of the United States announced that 158 ships of the Iranian Navy were destroyed. And also, he warned that any boat that approaches the blockade will be eliminated in a fast and brutal way. That's according to Trump's words. Yesterday, Trump updated that the Iranian Navy had been almost completely destroyed, with 158 ships that are laying on the seabed. In a post he published on Truth, the president sent a severe warning to what remains of the Iranian Navy, and his intention is the Revolutionary Guards Mosquito Fleet, a shift to fast attack boats. If one of them approaches our blockade, it will be eliminated immediately in a fast and brutal way, exactly as we act against drug traffickers. And this is all according to Donald Trump. He also noted that the United States will show no tolerance for attempts at provocations at sea, while CENTCOM forces enforce the blockade on the ground. The blockade will apply only to ships arriving at or leaving Iranian ports. Whoever crosses without permission will be seized. And this is according to Trump's statements. According to military reports, the American Navy prepared boarding teams for tankers, forces to deal with the threat of Iranian boats, all this alongside a mine-clearing mission by 2 clearance ships, and in addition to that, the United States military is also preparing for the possibility that the war will be renewed. It's important to note that passage of humanitarian supplies such as food and medicine will be approved subject to a security inspection. The Revolutionary Guards rushed to send a threat and declared, if Iranian ports will have no security, no port in the Gulf will have security. Trump claimed that this time the allies would help, but none of them mobilized. Nothing here makes sense. Look, it's important to remember that this means tens of billions of dollars a month in losses for Iran from the closure of the Strait of Hormuz by the Americans. In addition, the closing of oil fields caused water to penetrate the reservoirs, and as a result, permanent loss of part of the oil that can no longer be extracted is caused. With natural production decline of 5% to 8% a year, this could lead to the permanent destruction of 300,000 and up to 500,000 barrels a day. This is a tremendous blow to Iran. Political and security officials estimate that the Revolutionary Guards have almost no reserves left to continue this fighting. It has been revealed that the disagreements between senior Guard officials and the political echelon are deepening after the collapse of the talks with the United States. And at the same time, harsh economic data point to a sharp deterioration and growing pressure to renew the contacts with the United States. A spokesman for the Revolutionary Guards is threatening, and he says that if the war continues, we will reveal capabilities that the enemy is not aware that they exist. The spokesman for Iran's defense ministry also warns against intervention inside the Strait of Hormuz. And even the Chinese military is threatening. We will not honor the blockade on Iran. A senior figure in China's security leadership sent a sharp and dramatic threat to the United States after the declaration of a total blockade on the Strait of Hormuz and on Iran. And meanwhile, behind the scenes, Iran is attacking critical infrastructure in the United States through exposed industrial controllers. New reports by SICSA and Senseis reveal that Iranian hackers are exploiting controllers connected directly to the internet, using legitimate engineering tools from the manufacturer and harming the water, the sewage, and the energy facilities. And we will soon bring you all the details. The response of the European countries to the blockade in Hormuz has arrived. After the President of the United States declared a naval blockade on Iran, the key allies in Europe clarified, we will not be dragged into war. Britain and France are advancing an independent initiative to open the oil route only after the fighting ends. And meanwhile, the IDF is completely focused on the war against the Hezbollah terrorist organization in Lebanon, but, and this is a big but, with one eye open towards Iran. After the ceasefire between Iran and the United States, the IDF turned the Lebanese arena into the central one. This is together with preparations for a possible escalation. And at the same time, Hamas continues to build its strength, refuses to stand by the agreement and disarm, and it seems that the military round against it is just around the corner. Forces of the IDF's 98th Division completed the encirclement of the Shiite village in Binchbel in southern Lebanon and began the attack. The Secretary General of Hezbollah responded to this and said, we will not surrender. The Lebanese army is not capable of fighting its own citizens. He added that negotiations with Israel are unnecessary. The Secretary General of Hezbollah called on the Lebanese government to cancel the direct negotiation talks with Israel. In this speech, he attacked the government's decision to ban the organization's activities and claimed that his fighters are prepared for the operation of the fighting and for it to continue. So Hezbollah is breaking the rules and going against the negotiations with Israel. I'm Yair Pinto, with me is Mati Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground. We bring you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel. This is day 46 of the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And let us not forget the war against the Hezbollah terrorist organization and also the Hamas terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip. But 1 second before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click on the subscribe button. Most importantly, don't forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms to get your behind-the-scene, eye-level look of what's happening in Israel in this war. So, our senior correspondent for Middle East Affairs, Mati Shoshani, the blockade has begun. How do you think it is going to affect Iran?
First of all, Shalom Yair, it's good to see you again.
Hope that
And
was a
as to the
very good cup of coffee. I can use one also.
Tea, it's tea. Coffee was after lunch. But to your point, the blockade on Iran, one, I'm interested in, you quote a number, and the number is about $500 million a day. The math doesn't add up for me, and we're not the only ones running this number. It was published by the US government and several other outlets. I think the damage to the Iranian regime is even higher than that. It's probably double on a daily basis. You just run the math there. We're doing 1.5 million barrels of oil a day. A barrel of oil at full price is $110, $115, depending what kind of oil you're buying. Let's say they're selling at a discount of 20%. You're at $900 million a day just on crude oil. But anyway, we'll put that aside. The damage is substantial. Here's what we know. Day one of the blockade on Iran. One, there's damage to the Iranian economy, and the pressure seems to be working on the Iranian regime. Why do I say that? This is important to note. The Iranians, less than 12 hours after the blockade starts, they come out and say, by the way, guys, this is completely unconnected. Guess what? We're pretty much reaching an understanding when it comes to the enriched uranium with the United States. 3 days ago, our time, Israel, the exact opposite was said. The United States said openly, there is no understanding on the key components of the negotiation, and the top of that list was enriched uranium. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the Iranians seem to be reaching an understanding with the Americans. Is it a coincidence? I think not, Yael. I think this shows that the pressure on Iran is working. Now, here's the plan. There's two things happening here. One, the blockade is meant to do one thing first, which is to allow the US to sweep the bottom of the Hormuz Straits and the area beneath the surface for the mines that the Iranians claim that they can't find. Now, we know how they operate, so let's just call it what it is, a big fat lie. They're lying about that. They know where the mines are, but they refuse to clear them because they're trying to disrupt global trade. The US, as usual, is operating as the peacekeeper, the policeman, the babysitter for the world, and doing the cleanup work that other countries should be doing. And let's be clear here, should be paying for. Other countries should pay for this work, not the United States, but it is what it is. The second part is to start bleeding the Ayatollah regime, to bleed them from the income from oil, which is important, and natural gas, which is also important. And the second thing is to prevent the goods from coming into Iran. I want to be clear, this isn't about food. I know all the human rights activists around the world are going to suddenly wake up and realize that the biggest atrocity taking place in exactly 2 days is the US and the evil army, they're starving the Iranian people. Oy vavoy, what are we going to do? How are we going to save these people? Nonsense. Iran has a land border with several countries. It has a sea border with the Caspian Sea in the north. They're not about to face a food shortage whatsoever. What they are going to face is the raw materials that are coming in from China, that they use to build ballistic missiles, that they use for their war machine. That is going to be in a shortage with them sometime soon, forcing them to take much more complex routes through the mountains, on land, where it's easier to surveil them than what they previously had. So the number one goal here is hurt the Iranian war machine, hurt the economy of the Ayatollah regime, prevent them from being able to push forward as they were with the war. But there's another important thing here, Yael. We're in the middle of a ceasefire agreement. And in the ceasefire agreement, despite what Iran has said, they are the big violators of the ceasefire agreement. Why is that? Because the number 1, 2, and 3 item on that ceasefire agreement was, obviously, open the Strait of Hormuz. And they've refused to do that. Now, they do it in a sophisticated way, sort of. They have excuses. My dog ate the homework. My cat cut away at the paperwork. They always have an excuse for everything. The practical sense is that they have not opened up the Strait of Hormuz. And the fact that they haven't do that makes it very complicated for everyone involved to move forward with the negotiation. The US has dialed in on the way the Iranian regime negotiates. They know that they stall. They know that they play for time. They know that they lie. They know that they deceive. And the thing they did on Saturday, which is walk away from the negotiations, when it became clear that the Iranians had absolutely no interest in actually fulfilling their side of the negotiation, that shows wisdom. That shows that they've learned the lessons. That shows that they looked back at previous Trump-era negotiations, and more importantly, at Obama and Biden communications with the Iranians, and they know that you have to deal with them in the way they deal with the world, which is catch them at their bluff, catch them at their lie, and go after them in a way where they can't squeal or wiggle their way out of actually giving what they're supposed to give in this negotiation. Now we're going to hear news in the coming days of, look, the negotiations are restarting, et cetera, et cetera. That's all good. That's all great. Let's be clear here between me, you, and everyone else who's watching this show, Yael. If the negotiation doesn't end with a clear resolution on no enriched uranium, no ballistic missiles, no proxy warfare, no more killing our people, and opening up the Strait of Hormuz, there is no point in the negotiation. There's key issues on the table. They're very obvious. They are very clear. They are known and transparent to all that are involved. The only ones who are trying to wiggle their way out of it are the Iranian Ayatollah regime. They need to be stopped. They need to be treated as the deceivers, as the liars, as the corrupt crooks that they have been for decades, and forced into an agreement that weakens them substantially. That's the end goal here. And thank God that the Trump administration seems to fully understand how they operate and is working with them in that full understanding.
Is doing to Iran what they threatened to do to the rest of the world, closing the Strait of Hormuz to Iranian ports and to Iranian vessels, but actually leaving other ports open. Was this pre-planned before these negotiations began? Was this something that you think the Americans thought about in advance because they knew the response of the Iranians to negotiations?
Yeah, I missed the first part of your sentence. I only heard about the opened, closed Iranian ports and opened the other ones. What was the first part? I think you were muted.
Oh, yeah. No, the first part was that the Americans are basically doing to the Iranians what the Iranians threatened to do to the rest of the world by closing off all the ports, all the shipping lanes from and to the Strait of Hormuz. So my question is, was this pre-planned as like option B if the Iranians act unhonestly in the negotiations with the United States? Was this like already pre-planned on the table in the options that the Americans had in their arsenal?
Yeah, and we've talked about this for weeks, Yael, which is everyone who thought that the Americans had done everything they can, we're forgetting one big thing, the main thing here, which is that the U.S. never closed the sea lanes for the Iranian regime. The Iranians were still transporting oil out, transporting natural gas out, and importing goods. Some of them were being used for the war machine. They had the right to do that, and they were returning the favor to the Iranians as they did to their neighbors. I want to mention something, though, that is very problematic here, and it's the following. The Strait of Hormuz can be closed and can have a blockade by more than one entity at a time. As in, if the U.S. is closing the Strait of Hormuz for Iran, even at the same time, even though the U.S. is doing this to the Iranians can still prevent other countries from safely traveling through the Strait of Hormuz. And simply stated, right now, as we're standing here, the Strait of Hormuz is not fully open. There's here and there a trickle of ships going through. It is nowhere near the volume that existed pre-war, and it still shows you that the threat made by the Iranians to put mines in the Strait of Hormuz, to fire rockets at ships, to set fire to ships, that threat is still valid, and it's understandable. They still have the ability, even though the U.S. is putting a blockade on them, they can still threaten the ships that are going through. And this is important. Why is it important? Yeah, it's important because the global economy continues to suffer, even though Iran is suffering at the same time. There's this balance that needs to be played between putting pressure on the Iranians, but not allowing that same pressure to push down the global economy and to raise the cost of oil around the world. And we're nearing a point here, and this is a much broader conversation, where right now this is a price issue. We're about to hit a point where it becomes an actual availability issue around the world, where oil becomes something that is not available everywhere, where the processing plants, the refineries around the world, that we're turning crude oil into everything we use oil for, from plastics through gasoline for the cars, diesel for industry, heavy heavy fuels for ships and for industrial applications. All of that stops at one point or another. And some countries in Asia are about to run into a situation where they don't have gasoline in all the gas stations, where they don't have diesel. The Chinese are a primary concern in this entire conversation, where their army might be in a problem. We're in the middle of April. In about 6 to 8 weeks, they're going to start experiencing shortages in China, despite the fact that they had enormous, we're talking over 1 billion barrels of a emergency reserve in the country. They're going to run out of that. And if you think about what that does to a country and an economy the size of China, it is dramatic. If you're the Chinese, Communist Party leadership, and you're thinking about, I want to be able to keep my army mobile, I want to keep my industry running, I want to keep the power plants running, providing electricity to all of the above, and you know that there's a blockade and the Iranians are causing it, I'd ask you, Yael, what would you do to open up the straits? What would you do to make sure that the oil keeps flowing? And the answer is almost anything. So there's that coming down the horizon very quickly is a global shortage of oil. And it's dramatic, it's substantial. The same applies to natural gas. And farther down the line is other goods and stuff like that that would travel through that sea passage. But this is very substantial. It will be expensive, and it will also cause a geopolitical destabilizing effect, which will be hugely dramatic to many countries. And that's something that's coming quickly and is very, very, very significant, far beyond the financial implications of the blockade on Iran. And as this progresses, we're going to need to keep our eyes opened and our focus on what's coming down the pipeline, not just Iran itself, but the global effect on the economies from the steps that they took, and then the response that is carried out by the United States in the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah. Strong shift to a different arena, which is actually Israel's #1 area of conflict at the moment, Lebanon.
Yeah.
Like you and I know both from being in the IDF. This is, I think, the 3rd or 4th Israel-Hezbollah war that is taking place. And do you think that this time the IDF will be able to destroy this terrorist organization and maybe we can have peace with Lebanon?
I'll be honest with you, I don't think so. I count this as like the 4th one, not exactly in our lifetime, but in our lifetime plus a couple years. You had the first Lebanon war in the early 80s, second Lebanon war 2006, last year, so 2025, and then this year 2026. Look, realistically, last year, 12 months ago, or a little less, the Lebanese army and the Lebanese government had everything that they needed to have an agreement with the Lebanese, right? And they had everything they needed to push back on Hezbollah. And the Lebanese army and the Lebanese government proved that they were unable to fully force Hezbollah out. They didn't have the funds, they didn't have the power on the ground. And there's also a really complex, let's call it manpower issue in Lebanon, where many members of the Lebanese army have family members, friends who are fighters in the terrorist organization known as Hezbollah. I mean, this is how close it is. Hezbollah is better funded than the Lebanese army. And in a not very surprising turn of events, the Lebanese army was unable to push back on Hezbollah. They said they did. They claimed they were able to weaken it. What we're seeing right now fighting in Lebanon proves exactly the opposite. That's not the case. And I'd add one more thing here, Yael. Hezbollah is two things. It is a proxy force that is propped up and created by the Iranians, but it also actually represents the desire and the political orientation and ideology of some of the population of Lebanon. And that's an important distinction. They're not just a foreign, let's call it oppressor force, sponsored by the Iranians, which they are, but they're also representative of the anti-Israeli and anti-Western agenda held by some of the population in Lebanon. So if the goal is not to fully destroy Hezbollah, what is the goal? Well, like everything in the Middle East, it's to dramatically weaken them, to push them back physically, to hit their leadership, to hurt their weapons depots and their stockpiles of missiles, and specifically the long-range and accurate type of missiles, but also is to create a substantial line through which they cannot move to the southern part of Lebanon. And I'll explain this. Hezbollah is, Yael, you and I remember this very, very closely because we've lived in Israel our entire lives. Hezbollah has several different types of fighting force. They do the strategic, which is they fire missiles and rockets at Israeli communities, which is a huge threat. I'm not doubting it, not diminishing it, but that's, let's call it indirect fire. Then they have a second type of warfare, which is direct fire. They sit in their villages, including Bin Jbal, which is like the big war zone right now, and they fire, anti-tank missiles. Me and you, when was this? Was this last summer when we were in Manara, Yael? Me and you?
Yeah, exactly.
It was like last summer, so let's say like 9-10 months ago, we were in Manara. I still vividly remember it, Yael. We were walking through the houses there, and they were literally in a community of hundreds of homes. There wasn't a single house in that entire community that had a window or a wall facing into Lebanon that didn't have at least one anti-tank hole in the side of the building. as in the homes of the people living in Lebanon. These are Muslim villages, both Sunni and Shia, by the way, not just one or the other. The Hezbollah was set up inside those villages with the support of the people in those communities. This is important to state. And for months on months, they would fire from various windows, from various porches, from various bunkers within the village, and systematically destroy every single home that they had a line of sight to within Israel. And Israel looked at that and said, never again. We are not going to allow the Hezbollah to do this again. And we pushed back the first line. Then there's one more. Then there is the question of raiding Israel. The biggest threat before October 7th was the Radwan force. We've heard about them, going back 20 years ago. They are the
commando, the commando forces of Hezbollah. We went to the tunnels, both of us, on 2 different occasions. Their attack tunnels into Israel.
Yeah, and it's it's terrifying when you looked at what they were planning to do, and you heard Israel admitting openly to the fact that if a force, do you remember the numbers? I think they were like 20 to 30,000. No, sorry, 8 to 10,000 Radwan forces in southern Lebanon before October 7th, right? It was something along those lines.
Yeah, I remember. And just like 500 meters from the border, not even far, like in a valley, in a river, really close to the border. And there was nothing that the IDF could have done to prevent them from taking control of Israeli communities in the northern border. Like multiple communities would have been captured until the IDF would be able to respond back in the day before October 7th. Now the situation have changed completely with the IDF having positions inside South Lebanon. And that's why it's so important to have some ground that basically a buffer zone between the terrorists and Israel, without trusting the United Nations peacekeeping force, because they don't do anything. I mean, you've been at their base, and from the base, it's just basically a rock throw distance to a tear tunnel of Hezbollah. Like, you cannot miss them digging a huge tunnel underneath your nose. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
I mean, unless you're deaf, blind, and can't read Braille.
The best of the best peacekeeping forces they're sending.
it would literally, let me elaborate the point you made. Okay, one, these forces were set up, I don't know if Toma's on the call. I don't think Toma can hear us. But when we were there, they had, I think in one of the tunnel systems that we were in, they were able to hold over 1,000 soldiers with their equipment and rations for several weeks. We're talking a substantial cave system. And it was built into like bedrock. This isn't like limestone. We're talking like basalt. This is the rocks of northern Israel.
Of Lebanon,
it's this hard like this hard like lava sourced rock. It's very hard to dig through, very hard to explode. They spent, I mean, it must have been tens of millions of dollars digging each one of these tunnels, and literally, and then using explosives. And there's a UN peacekeeper, quote unquote, base that's literally within eyesight of the position. Literally, they were probably having trouble taking their naps and having their midday tea and coffee in that base from the noise of the construction of those attack tunnels inside Lebanon. And yet they claimed that they didn't know about this happening. And what was Hezbollah planning to do? They were open about this. This is not me saying, it's not Yair saying. They publicly said, we're planning to come into Israel to take over communities with men, women, children. We're planning to murder them, and then we're going to take them hostage and take them into Lebanon or use them as hostages to create a maximum terror effect within Israel. This is what their army or their terrorist army planned to do. I mean, think of this. It's such a horrific event. And this was their plan. So for Israel to go back to life as usual while they have the option of doing that is impossible. We can't allow them to go back. So there's 2 things we need to do. We need to strengthen the Lebanese government and army. And the second one is we need to give the Hezbollah a beating that they will take years to recover from. They already suffered substantially last year in Midnight Hammer, but and also before that, of course, in the last 2 years of war, especially during the pager attack. But then it gets more serious than that. That's not enough. They need to be pushed back, and the umbilical cord that connects them to Iran, the source of their money, the source of their weapons, the source of their training, that needs to be cut off and nipped, and Iran needs to be prevented from doing that again. Because again, if there's a country that's spending, think about the numbers, spending billions of dollars a year on training a terrorist army in our backyard, every single year. We can't allow that to happen. We have to go after them. We have to weaken them. We have to target them to make sure that they can't attack our communities. To sum that up, this is the most important war that we're fighting right now. Israel has said clearly, we will not stop fighting until we weaken and eliminate Hezbollah as much as possible. And the negotiation with the Iranians shouldn't be part of this conversation. And so far, thank God, President Trump has been on our side on this and said, yes, this is separate, this is different than the negotiations. Israel has a right to fight against Hezbollah, not Lebanon, but fight against Hezbollah.
Yeah, I think that's the key distinction that many people miss around the world. This is not a war between Israel and Lebanon as a country. Lebanon has an army. They have a government, not so strong compared to the Hezbollah terrorist organization, sadly. But this is the point. This is why we want these negotiations to happen, to help the Lebanese people take back their country. Because right now, Israel is fighting in Lebanon the Iranian proxy Hezbollah, and it's causing damage to all the Lebanese people. So Hezbollah is not just acting on its own or on behalf of the Lebanese people, it's acting on behalf of the Iranian regime in Lebanon as a proxy that destabilizes the economy, destabilizes the potential of diplomatic relations between Israel and Lebanon. You know, Mati, I want to go to Lebanon. I heard it's a beautiful country. Oh. I mean, I want to go there without tanks and without, the uniform and eating tuna cans. I want the full experience to go to restaurants, to sit by the beach like a civilian. I think it's a possibility that we can have this if we take down Hezbollah and the Iranian influence. It'll be cool to go there and make an episode, Mati.
Yeah, I hope that happens in our lifetime.
Well, Mati, thank you so much for this update, and we'll see you again later on tonight.
That's right. Thank you.
And to all of you that are joining us now, I'm Yair Pinto. That was Mati Shoshani. We are TBN Israel. We have a whole team of researchers, editors, cameramen, technicians that bring you daily updates on what's happening in Israel, in this war between the United States, Iran, Hezbollah, Lebanon. Everything that's happening in this region affects all of us. So we need your help. If you want to help us reach more people, please hit the subscribe button so that you never miss another boots on the ground update from Israel. Because, if you're watching this video, hopefully you love Israel. You care about what's happening here. And right now, especially with everything that's going on in this region, the war, the threats from Iran, tourism being down, small Israeli businesses are feeling it in real way. They feel the pressure. That's why we want to tell you about something that we personally recommend, and it's called Arza Box. We know the team behind it, we know the heart behind it, and we've seen the impact that they're making here on the ground. Arza creates beautifully curated seasonal boxes filled with handcrafted produce from the Israeli artisans, small family businesses all across the country. Every box is themed around a biblical location and delivered straight to your door. So when you order, you're not just buying something beautiful, you are directly blessing Israel. And right now, they've just launched their newest seasonal release, which is called the Jordan River Box. It's an incredible box because it's the very place where Jesus was baptized. And through Arza, you can feel like it was when you were standing there, almost as coming to Israel yourself. I can't lie, wish you could come here in person. Nothing beats that. But this box is designed to bring that experience into your home in a tangible way. It's immersive, it's faith-centered, and it connects you and your family to the land where Jesus walked. And these are seasonal limited boxes. Once this box closes, it doesn't come back because we'll create something new. So if you want to stand with Israel in a real practical way and deepen your connection to your faith, go now to arzabox.com/TBNIL. Again, that's ARTZABOX.com/TBNIL and use the coupon code TBNIL for 15% off of your subscription. Again, that's arzabox.com and use the coupon code TBNIL for 15% off of your subscription. That way you can be a blessing to Israel and help us also create more content from this land. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the American naval blockade on Iran went into effect. And in those very same minutes, the struggle moved from declarations to enforcement. United States Central Command began blocking all maritime traffic to and from the Iranian ports in the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. And Trump added a sharp threat. Any Iranian vessel that approaches the blockade zone will be destroyed. The question now is very simple and sharp. Is this the move that will force Tehran back to the negotiating table, or the step that will push the entire region into a new round of war? This is the heart of day 46 of the Roaring Lion War, or by its American name, Epic Fury. No longer just excuses of fire, no longer just exchanges of threats, but a shift into a phase in which the United States is trying to close off Iran's economic lifeline. This blockade was not defined as a total sealing of the entire strait, but a targeted enforcement against any ship entering or leaving the Iranian ports, regardless of its flag. From Washington's perspective, this is the middle stage between failed diplomacy and a full renewal of a war. The operational message was clear. Any vessel that enters or leaves the blockaded area without authorization could be diverted, intercepted, seized, and boarded. Even neutral vessels may be subject to inspection and search, and at the same time, it was clarified that free passage through the Strait of Hormuz would continue as long as the destination is not Iranian, and not that humanitarian shipments that include food, medicine, and essential supplies, they will be allowed through subject to security checks to the Iranian people. But in other words, the United States is trying to send two messages at once. On the ground, economic strangulation. On the other hand, an attempt to present controlled force, not chaos. But on the ground, anyone who knows Hormuz understands that there is no such thing as a controlled move without risk. This is one of the most important trade arteries of the global oil supply normally passes through it. The moment that the United States Fifth Fleet begins enforcing a blockade, every ship, every captain, every insurance company, every energy raider, and every oil importing country starts recalculating the risk. That's why Britain also issues a new guidance today through its Maritime Trade Agency, stating that access restrictions will apply to all vessels that pass through the Iranian ports, all terminals, and coastal facilities. Neutral vessels currently inside Iranian ports were given a limited grace period to leave. The Americans did not come to this moment empty-handed. According to reports from the last 24 hours, more than 15 American warships are already deployed in the area to support the operation. Earlier, the preparation mission had already been carried out with dozens of destroyers entering this zone, alongside efforts to locate naval mines and also prepare the area for enforcement. In one of the early incidents, an American destroyer shot down an Iranian intelligence gathering drone that approached it. That was not just a tactical incident, it was a message. The United States is showing that it is not only declaring a blockade, but is preparing to defend it under direct threat. Against that background, Trump raised the rhetorical bar all the way. He claimed that the Iranian Navy is lying on the bottom of the sea. And he spoke about the 158 ships that were destroyed and warned that fast attack boats approaching the blockade would be hit immediately. He then also tried to project confidence to the markets by saying that 34 ships passed through the strait yesterday, the highest number since the start of this closure, according to Trump. But here, it's important to note the small detail that explains the bigger picture. Those numbers belonging to the phase before full enforcement. The moment that the blockade became active, the real test is no longer how many ships passed yesterday, but how many will dare to approach tomorrow. And already now, the first enforcement and the tests are beginning to appear. One tanker with Chinese ties, already under American sanctions, approached the strait, stopped, turned around, and went back. It was a short test, almost technical, but the market reads it clearly. It only takes one tanker testing the new boundaries and backing off for every other company to understand that the risk is not theoretical. On the other hand, there are also reports of another vessel that managed to pass, which shows that at this stage, enforcement is still not airtight. And that's exactly what makes the situation more dangerous, chaos, but a gray zone. And in a gray zone, sometimes one mistake in navigation, in identification, or judgment is enough to open a front. And behind this naval line lies the real objective, to hit Iran's cash reserves. And according to the figures that are emerging today, the blockade could cause Iran direct losses of about $435 million per day, or as Mati discussed before, even more than that if we calculate $100 per barrel times the amount of barrels that the Iranians would export every single day. But it's roughly $13 billion a month at the low side. So that more than 90% of Iran's foreign trade passes through the Persian Gulf. Before the blockade, Iran exported about 1.5 million barrels of oil a day and brought in close to $139 million daily from crude oil alone. At the same time, the petrochemical sector is almost also being hit. And so is the non-oil exports. Once this blockade begins, it is not only the oil that gets struck, Iran's entire maritime trade and their mechanisms begins to seize up. And this is where an important technical detail comes in, one that does not always make it into the headlines, but explains why time is now so critical for Tehran. Iran's land-based storage capacity is estimated at about 50 to 55 million barrels, with only about 20 million barrels of free space remaining. If production continues but exports are blocked, those storage facilities could fill up in about 13 days. And what happened then? The wells shut down. And shutting down oil fields is not like flipping an on-off switch. Water intrusion into reservoirs can cause irreversible damage and the permanent loss of 300,000 and up to 500,000 barrels per day of production capacity. In simple terms, not only immediate losses, but long-term damage to Iran's ability to recover. And all of this is hitting an economy that has already been on the edge. Inside Iran, they're already speaking about high inflation, extreme currency erosion, depleted foreign currency reserves, and the entire systems struggling to survive. According to the estimates emerging today, if this situation continues, inflation could even climb towards the 180% range, and another 2 million people could be pushed into unemployment. Warnings are reaching the Iranian president day after day, including alerts that without immediate income and without relief from sanctions, large parts of the population could face hunger. And this is no longer only an argument between Tehran and Washington over centrifuges. This is pressure on the nerves of the regime itself. This is where the story really starts to tighten, because alongside the external pressure, the information coming out of the Iranian arena also points to a growing internal conflict. According to the assessments, the Revolutionary Guards have almost no significant reserves left for continued fighting. At the same time, the divide between the military ideological leadership and the civilian political leadership is deepening. What reached a dead end in Pakistan was not only because of the technical clauses on uranium, it was also because of the question of who in Tehran is actually authorized to compromise and who is capable of paying the political price of making concessions. In the talks held in Pakistan, the Americans demanded three clear things: the full reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, the removal of highly enriched uranium from Iran, and a long-term commitment not to develop nuclear weapons. The Iranians refused to remove the material and instead proposed significant dilution under supervision inside Iran. There were also reports that Iran agreed to freeze enrichment for 5 years, while the United States demanded a 20-year freeze. For Trump, that was not enough. For the Iranians, that was already an offer designed to show flexibility without total surrender. And so, instead of a draft agreement, we got a naval blockade. Vice President J. Vance put it sharply: the ball is on Tehran's court. And according to him, there were meaningful talks. There was some progress, but in the end, the Iranians could not close a deal and had to return to Tehran for approval. He also explained that the American delegation left because it understood how the other side operates. Van spoke of roughly 21 hours of talks in total. That's not a small amount of time, and it also explains why Washington sees the move to blockade not as an impulsive act, but as the next step after exhausting a diplomatic effort. And yet, the door has not been shut completely. Donald Trump himself said that the right people had called for Iran, that they want a deal, but are refusing to give up the nuclear issue. American networks also reported that officials in the administration are still considering the possibility of another direct meeting with the Iranians before the ceasefire expires, and perhaps even extending the ceasefire to allow talks to continue. And at the same time, Pakistan, Egypt, Turkey, and Qatar continue pushing behind the scenes. So, on one side, an American fleet is blocking the ports. On the other side, those same players are still looking for a way back to the table. Sounds normal. One hand on the trigger, the other holding a phone. But at this very moment, Europe is signaling that it is not ready to fully play Trump's game. Major NATO countries made it clear that they will not join the blockade. Britain and France are speaking about a separate initiative that would try to reopen the oil route, but only after there is a stable ceasefire. Macron is even promoting the idea of a multinational defensive force that would deploy and will deploy only when conditions allow it. The diplomatic meeting here, it matters because Trump is projecting strength, but within the Western camp itself, there is no consensus. And that weakens the sense of unified international pressure on Iran. And it also gives Tehran room to try to buy time. So keep spreading the truth, follow us, and most importantly, do not forget to click the subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. So keep looking for us, Mati Shoshani and Yair Pinto, on our social media platforms so you see Israel through our eyes behind the scenes. And now, while the world looks east toward Hormuz, Israel is looking north, this direction, towards Lebanon. The IDF has once again made that area our central area of operations because Division 98 completed the encirclement and launched an assault on Binchbel. The forces, including brigade combat teams from the paratroopers, the commando, and Givati units, eliminated more than 100 Hezbollah terrorists in close quarters fighting, and also from the air. They destroyed dozens of terror infrastructures and located hundreds of weapons. In the area, launchers, various types of weapons, and terror compounds were prepared for continued fighting and for raids, and they were destroyed after they were identified. Binchbel is not just another point on the map, it is a symbol. For years, it became a symbolic and operational stronghold of Hezbollah. The same stadium where Nasrallah once delivered his spider web speech against Israel has already been destroyed. And now, what was once a symbolic center of boasting is turning underground into a devastated zone under expanding Israeli control. According to the plans, the IDF is completing its positioning at the forward points in southern Lebanon. And next week, it is expected to move from encirclement and assault into a stabilization phase. The plan is to establish 10 more outposts, in addition to the 5 that are already in the sector. And this is not happening in a vacuum. The IDF assesses that Hezbollah intended to launch raids and rocket fire from this area towards Israeli communities such as Avivim, Yarion, Malkia, and Dovev. There is an assessment that dozens of additional terrorists, including Radwan forces, are still in the town and its surroundings, and that Hezbollah is trying to move reinforcements towards the trapped forces. And that explains why the fighting there looks so dense, so brutal, and so close. Not a war of distant fire lines, but combat at a range of mere meters. And on the same front, the IDF also updated the picture regarding the large opening strike in Lebanon carried out on April 8th. After continued intelligence monitoring, it was confirmed that more than 250 Hezbollah terrorists and also commanders were terminated in that strike. And there are estimates that the number is already above 300. In 1 minute, according to a senior source, dozens of command centers were hit. Amongst those that were terminated were senior commanders in logistics, intelligence, and also the missile array. This is not just a blow to manpower. It is a blow to Hezbollah's ability to reorganize a target bank and also to move weapons, to rebuild infrastructure, and sustain fire over time. And against this, Naim Qassem is trying to regain control through the microphone. He came out today against the very existence of the direct talks between Israel and Lebanon in Washington, calling them surrender, humiliation, and a series of unnecessary concessions, and urging the Lebanese government to cancel the meeting. He said that Hezbollah will not rest and will not surrender, accused the government of serving Israeli interests, and even warned against attempts to ignite the civil war inside Lebanon. And at the same time, official Lebanese sources are trying to send the opposite message, that the Lebanese issue has been separated from the Iranian issue, and that Iran will not be allowed to regain control over the situation in Lebanon. This may be one of the most interesting lines of this day. Hezbollah is trying to convince Lebanon that negotiations mean surrender. The Lebanese government is trying to convince the world that it is taking ownership of the state once more. And in the middle of all, the security services in Beirut are moving to high alert out of fear that external escalation could quickly turn into internal confrontation. Security around the diplomatic missions have been reinforced. Reports in Lebanon speak of the need for preventative measures in the streets, especially in Beirut and Mount Lebanon. In other words, Israel's war against Hezbollah is not only on the border, it's already shaking the internal structure of Lebanon itself. Within that picture, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is expected to take part in the talks between Israel and Lebanon, and that's an important detail because the United States is signaling here that it is not mediating only Iran and Hormuz, but is also trying to shape the new order in Lebanon. The American message is simple. Israel is at war with Hezbollah, not with Lebanon and the Lebanese people. If so, from Washington's point of view, there is logic in direct dialogues between the states, even under fire. Hezbollah, of course, understands exactly what that means. Not only a loss of territory and also military power, but also the loss of its political monopoly over the Lebanese arena. And while all of this is happening, Israel is not taking its eyes off Iran. In the IDF, Iran is currently being defined as the primary readiness arena. The Air Force is working around the clock with ground crews and technical teams to keep aircrafts and platforms at the highest readiness. The logistics branch is replenishing munition stocks. Military intelligence is updating its target bank. The assumption in Israel is that the American blockade could bring two opposite outcomes: either pressure that pushes Tehran back to negotiations, or an Iranian move to break the rules and renew fire towards Israel. In other words, even if the move was carried out by the United States, Israel is already preparing to pay the price if Iran decides to respond through the Israeli arena. And under all of this, Gaza has not disappeared. On the contrary, according to the current assessments, Hamas continues rebuilding its strength, rearming, and also insisting that it will not disarm. In Israel, they are beginning to understand that another maneuver in the south is no longer a question of if, but more a question of when. And after 2.5 years of war across 7 fronts, the military system is moving in a harsh cycle. Iran, Lebanon, Gaza, back forth, then south again. And the feeling coming out of this day is that this is not the end of a chapter, but only the switching of arenas within the same war. Even in the broader arena, the voices coming from Tehran continue along 2 tracks. On the one hand, the Iranian president says that he is ready to continue talks and in the form of an international law. On the other hand, regime spokespeople are threatening that the blockade will be answered by strikes on other ports in the Gulf. In videos being circulated by the Revolutionary Guards, they're trying to show that the movement in the strait is still under full Iranian control. This is a war over perception as well, over the confidence of energy markets, over the nerves of investors, and over the question of who appeals stronger in this very moment. Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, for his part, chose tonight to speak in both historical and moral languages. At Yad Vashem, the Israeli memorial for the Holocaust, he said that Europe is infected with deep moral weakness, that it has lost control over its identity and its commitment to defend civilization against barbarism. It is a speech that looks back at Holocaust Remembrance Day, but directly touches the war at present. The message is clear. Israel sees itself as acting with force where others are still hesitating, holding back, or waiting for someone else to deal with the threat. And within this sequence of events, there was also another casualty in the Gaza Strip. The IDF and the Shin Bet announced that they eliminated Ibrahim Mahmoud Bishati, who took part in the building collapsed in the disaster in which 21 IDF soldiers were killed in January of 2024. That is an important detail to include in the picture because even when the focus shifts to Hormuz and to Lebanon, the settling of accounts in the Gaza Strip still continues. Hamas is still getting stronger, still threatening us and also the Palestinian people in Gaza. That arena is not quiet, and it keeps moving beneath the radar of the main headlines. This is what Day 44 looked like. United States closing in at sea. Israel pressing on land. Iran under pressure from within. And Hezbollah trying to stop through diplomacy what it cannot stop on the battlefield. And if all of these fronts are now converging at the same point, what happens the moment that one of them breaks first? I want to share one final tribute to an Israeli hero, a hero of Israel who fell defending the nation of Israel. The IDF spokesperson cleared for publication this morning that Master Sergeant in the reserves, Eyal Uriel Bianco, 30 years of age from Katzrin in the north, was killed when a Humvee overturned in southern Lebanon. In the same incident in which Bianco fell, one reserve soldier was moderately wounded and two other reserve soldiers were lightly wounded. Soldiers were evacuated to the hospital for medical treatment and their families were notified. So, other than sharing the truth, which is very important, and subscribing to TBN Israel, I would say top of the line is to keep praying. So I ask all of you to pray for the situation, pray for our troops fighting in Lebanon, pray for wisdom to the leaders in the negotiations, if it's a negotiation between Israel and Hezbollah, Israel in Lebanon, and the United States and Iran. Pray for all the servicemen that are now blocking the Iranians in the Strait of Hormuz. Keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.